Right then, let's have a look at some of these coins then, and just to get it out there, I'm not your financial advisor, it's not financial advice, but let's have a look all the same. So we'll start with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin again is sort of trending in its sideways patterns, can't help itself but move a little bit further down. In fact, this is kind of what we should be expecting from it since we had this death cross anyway. The majority, if not all now actually, apart from this 50 simple, is actually sloping down, and that would suggest a change in trend, a bearish trend, and that trend is probably, in my book, like I said yesterday, it's probably going to come back down to test this 9,200 area to the 9,000 and see if we can find a bounce like we saw here. My expectation is that if we do come back down to this area now and we've had this death cross, we probably won't have such a significant bounce, but that's just my expectation of it. At the moment it wants to go sideways. RSI looks like it wants to mess around in this area, but we're going to be finding, as we've already seen here, resistances at moving averages, and we're not even coming up to test the main ones, which are the 50 and the 200 EMA. We're actually finding bounces in the middle of the Bollinger Band really. So yeah, it looks like to me it wants to keep coming down, and it is going to test, and probably, well, we'll say to start with, it's going to test this area. We'll see what sort of wick that creates when it does test it, and work out if it's likely to break. My expectation is if it does test it, it probably will break it. Not immediately, but over time this is where it's wanting to go. It's still in correction, as we see here. Now then, we'll move on to another one, and just as an example of what we're seeing here, I'll show you another example, which is a coin that we all have been following, which is the Matic chart. Matic had the same sort of deal in a much more amplified way. We had this big parabolic top, and then we had corrections, and look how long the corrections have played out. Now Matic and Bitcoin are completely different. They're going to work differently, but the sentiment of a parabolic top or a large move is always going to be the same. So Matic has corrected quite dramatically and is continuing to correct actually as we speak. Still looking to make lower lows probably on this coin until something changes in the market. And with Matic hasn't got any incentive at the moment to move up in a drastic way. But it's the same really across the alts in general. Matic has been hit hardest when you look at where it's come from, but then if you zoom back even further and see where it started, then it's actually not too bad. But our trading ranges now are very, very small, very, very tight, which suggests to me that there is likely to be a break in some way or another. And looking at it now, it looks like it may have bottomed out yet again at that 113, 14 Satoshi level, which is where it gets picked up again. Now it's not looking too bad at the moment when you compare it to Bitcoin, but if you're looking to purchase anything at the moment, that would be, it's actually not looking too bad. But again, I'm not your financial advisor, not financial advice, but this might be, or if it comes back down to test this area, that 114 Satoshi area, might not be too much of a bad idea to pick some up. But that's just my take on the matter. We'll move on to Celr. So Celr was doing okay last time I looked at it actually, but it has fallen quite heavily. It did do some decent moves, to be honest with you. It was doing some very decent moves until this whole market dropped out, and Celr is suffering. But when we look at what it did, I mean this area here was all to do with that whole Matic FOMO, and the people were jumping on the bandwagon here. So I don't really count this as real growth. What we saw here was relatively good, and what we saw here was pretty interesting too. So it does have some promise, some relative strength on this coin. The problem being is that we're not 100% sure if it's bottomed out yet, and given the nature of the market, it may not have bottomed out. We've made new lows here again, so yeah, I mean it still looks like it wants to fall further. But when it works out where it wants to go to, then this might be another one to pick up as well. Looking at it now, all moving averages are obviously down. They're finding a little correction. Well, I say correction, a reversal in the trend. Finding a bit of support on these moving averages here, and they're beginning to slope up. But I don't think that's a long-term thing. I think it would be nice if it has bottomed out. Some of these coins look like they definitely have bottomed out now, but the market is still uncertain, and with an uncertain market comes uncertain moves. And if we can find ourselves going a little higher than this and then consolidating but not making new lows, and again, once we've done that around 2 or 3 times more, then we can maybe start to perhaps get excited and work out if this one is one of those ones you want to buy. At the moment, most moving averages, the 2 most important ones, are facing down. They did have a death cross up here, so this is what we expect. If this were to bend up and cross over this guy here, that's green over the white, then that it would be a good sign and perhaps maybe a buying opportunity. Even if it looks like it's going to do it, we've got to see how far this move takes us. If this move starts to really rise, this will start to bend, and if the trajectory looks like it's certainly going to happen, then it might be a worthwhile buy. And if we look at the Satoshi pairings, it's actually doing okay in comparison to Bitcoin, but only today. No real telltale signs of if this is actually a recovery, and if it is, it needs a consolidation before it continues for it to be healthy. Harmony One, a bit of a sorry show for it at the moment. It's following the rest of the IEOs. It's not doing its own thing at the moment, which is unfortunate for one. It's riding the sort of the bandwagon of people like Celr and Matic when they move. But that's fair enough, because that's exactly what those coins do when one makes moves. At the moment, it's pretty much the same as the other guys. A bit more movement to the up when we're looking at the Satoshi pairing. We're going to find resistance on these two. This is the 50 EMA and the 50 Simple. They're going to be quite strong to break above. If we do break above it though, because they are levelling out, if we do break above it and stay above it, that could spark a reversal in trend. And tether pairing is actually looking pretty sorry, actually, not very good. In fact, pretty awful actually. The only good thing about it is that because it's been trending sideways for so long, the moving averages aren't as steep and sloped down. Even though they are facing down, they're not too steep. So it could start some form of reversal, maybe, but not yet. ERD. So we look at this every now and then. Not that I can really tell you a great deal about this chart, other than right now it's bearish. It is bearish, but much like the other guys, it has made you technically can call this a higher low, and it looks like it wants to have some form of continuation, but it's so early that the technical analysis on something like this is very difficult. When we look at the tether pairing, if we can make a higher high than this area, which would be 0.004, if we can get above there and stay above there, then we might be looking at some reversal in trend. In fact, we'll check the that's annoying. We'll check the pairing with Bitcoin, and it's not as good as the other IEOs. Let's be fair. It's going sideways. Very low Satoshi volume though, so I mean low Satoshis in general. So these movements are harder to achieve than the ones that you'd find on people like Matic and Celr, who are in the hundreds or just above. That said, it's a sideways trend, and if we can get above 40, let's just say for safety purposes 42 Satoshis, then things might pan out okay. Right, let's have a look at BitTorrent token. So yeah, this is what I mean when you've got low Satoshi value, we just go sideways really. Each tick is quite valuable, so we've been trading from as low as 8 to as much as 11 around here. We're waiting for that to really kick in with this guy, but looking at the Satoshi pairing, when Bitcoin falls, BitTorrent falls, and they kind of fall at the same speed now, so it would suggest that we're going to stay in this range until BitTorrent token itself picks up pace. And if we look here at the tether pairing, we didn't make a new low, so that's good. Technically you can call this a high low, but the trend is now sideways, and to be honest with you, it doesn't look that great either. All moving averages facing down, indicators suggest sideways, at least sideways, with a small tinge to the up perhaps but what we would have wanted to have seen after this move here would have been a correction, a consolidation pattern, but not quite as steep as this, and with more of a bounce to it than what we've seen here. There's not been a bounce, and so that's it kind of worries me a little. It doesn't look that healthy. It looks very weak at the moment, so got to wait and see how it wants to play itself out underneath all moving averages, almost all but the 50 simple facing down, so perhaps maybe a little further to go, or test this area here of 0.0078 before we find another bounce again. This one's very vulnerable to the rest of the market, so if the market goes, this guy goes now as well. It never used to be that way. It used to be quite strong in comparison to the market. All kinds of moves were happening amongst this area here, and it showed relative strength, and then it just couldn't take it anymore, fell. But never mind. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today, so I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. I've got a few more subscribers now, which I'm very pleased to have. I've broken the 500 subscriber mark, which isn't much, because I know we're used to watching people with thousands and thousands, but to me, that's a big achievement. So thanks a lot for subscribing. Really appreciate it. Take it easy. Goodbye.